Citizen. I just retired a couple months ago as Director of Distribution for a large healthcare company, where in my role I was responsible for transportation of about 30 tractor-trailer loads of hazardous materials per day, interstate transport to 50 states. So my main concern here today, among other concerns though, is transportation of spent nuclear waste. Don had some comments earlier about the safety of shipment of nuclear waste, and he is correct that there has been no release of radiation in over 3,000 shipments to date of nuclear waste. However, there have been 90 accidents involving casks of nuclear waste during that period of time. There was a study done about 10 years ago concerning shipment of nuclear waste to Yucca Mountain, and the authors of that study speculated that there would be anywhere from 25,000 to 90,000 shipments of nuclear waste over a 4-decade period to Yucca Mountain. So now we're talking about transferring those shipments potentially to the Savannah River site. Their prediction was that based on their research, there would be hundreds of accidents in those 25,000 or more shipments. And even though there have been no releases of nuclear waste to date, they speculated that no releases of radiation to date. They speculated that there could, in fact, be radiation releases as a result of those shipments. So I'm concerned about the transportation of the spent nuclear waste to the Savannah River site. We're now moving it twice instead of once. I believe we should ship the nuclear waste to a geological repository once and be done with it. Thank you.
In 1989, April of '89, I hired on with Westinghouse in reactor restart, but I am here speaking as a concerned citizen. In the mid-90s, I had the opportunity to be one of 2 individuals that inspected nuclear fuel in Western Europe for about 3 weeks prior to the first urgent relief shipment that came back over here to rub off. But in '98, I left the area to take a job as a pastor at the Presbyterian Church in Charlotte. Spent 15 years in Charlotte, but just have recently returned to the community. I've always loved the community of Aiken, and looking forward to fully retiring in the near future. And so I wanted to make my way down. And so as a concerned citizen, having just sold my house in Charlotte, spent most of my time finding a home here, Monday, I guess it was Tuesday of last week, I recognized in the paper that the board made a decision relative to its position paper that's going to be voted up or down tomorrow on SRS interim storage of used nuclear fuel. I would encourage you to consider voting that down at present. This is why. I agree with many of the premises that you've all reached. I think there is no real good justification for the Yucca Mountain shutdown. I agree with that. There is no better place for long-term storage than Yucca. I agree with that. I agree that wherever spent nuclear fuel or used nuclear fuel is internally stored, it will probably be stored a lot longer than originally intended. But I'm not prepared to conclude that long-term interim storage is de facto long-term repository and is not consistent with calling it a storage dump. It would be a nuclear project, whether it's here or elsewhere. It's a valid project. I'm also not prepared to make the conclusion that there won't be some substantial money and benefit to the local economy. I also think that it's very likely that the CAB is out of touch really with the consensus, with the opinion of the community. For example, since I've become aware of this situation, Thursday evening, I spent a number of hours in the grill at the golf course speaking to a number of individuals. Some of their wives came out after playing, to a man, to a woman there No one seemed to be, two of them believed that it would reduce or hurt the economy in the CSRA. But the next evening, spent an evening at the pool, talked with a number of individuals there, found no one that thought somehow bringing spent fuel or used fuel to the site would be any harm to the communities. On Saturday, I had the opportunity of being involved in a church meeting in Augusta with representatives from churches in the 5 counties in Georgia along the Savannah River site. The men that were represented there, as well as their wives, again, I found none of them that were opposed to bringing used fuel to the Savannah River site. All of them saw it as a positive option. Sunday in church spoke to a number of individuals. Again, a diverse group of people from all walks of life. Still, I found none. Now, I've done a little bit of studying in sampling and the like. I know I have a small sample, but I really believe that you potentially, as a board, have listened to a very small, maybe a vocal minority. I believe if you pass this position paper tomorrow, you will shortly thereafter find that you have not accurately represented the majority opinion of the citizens of the CSRA. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next person is Susan Wood, and after that is Wayne Rickman.
I'm a retired director of the Savannah River National Laboratory and a 19-year resident of Aiken County. These remarks also pertain to the position paper before you on interim storage of spent nuclear fuel. I request that this committee vote no on the proposal on interim storage being considered at today's meeting. This vote would allow the community to keep all options open with respect to this potential new mission. It is simply too early to take a position which categorically refuses spent fuel, since as of this date, there is no definitive national plan, and the time frame for a path forward has not been published. The best approach for the community is to wait and evaluate the opportunity such a mission would provide in terms of overall benefits. Many positives, I believe, would result from such a new SRS mission, including high-quality jobs and technology development activities, and also the continuing benefits for local businesses, educational institutions, and community giving. The Savannah River site has been a long-time anchor for programs such as United Way and a plethora of other philanthropic efforts. A number of degree professionals assist in the schools, both in the classroom and for extracurricular activities. Important contributions. The local volunteer efforts are substantive and often applauded. And furthermore, the salary levels provide disposable income which flows down to local businesses. Economic studies have clearly shown that the presence of SRS had made this community a desirable place to be. The attributes which were in large part grown by the presence of SRS enable economic development efforts to attract new businesses and hence grow the economic base. These factors are all highly positive. The anti-spent nuclear fuel sentiments expressed at prior meetings that I have attended do not reflect the opinions of the people in the CSRA with whom I have spoken. To state that this represents the community perspective is not accurate. I request that your position keep the option open for interim storage for this community. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. We have Wayne Rickman and then Laird Rickman.
I'll serve about 27 years. I would like to address the perspective on rejecting the possibility of SRS becoming an interim storage site for spent nuclear fuel. I feel that the proposed action does not accept, the proposed action not to accept the fuel for interim storage is premature. There is no government proposal identified for basing such a recommendation. The Greater Chamber of Commerce position that SRS is the most important economic engine in the region is well accepted. It is also an operation. There is no better laboratory to conduct the work than SRNL. The decision to accept or reject storage should be done when all the pros and cons. You've just been informed today, again, about the area, about the loss of job, possible loss of jobs due to funding cutback. If the interim storage were to become an operation at the site, it would be a funding stream in addition to and different from the site restoration funding. One funding stream would not necessarily be impacted by the changes in the other funding stream. All of us are aware for the requirement that the location of interim storage site to be consent-based. That would seem to be the appropriate time to decide whether or not to participate in this proposal. Therefore, I recommend that you reject this position at this early stage, allowing you to become part of the consensus-based process when all the hard facts are known. Thank you for your...
Pamela Greenlaw.
Thank you. I have a feeling a lot of people on the cab don't know who I am, but for some of the people who have been around a long time, I first came to the Savannah River plant 46 years ago. And over those ensuing 46 years, I, as a professor at the University of Georgia in ecology, and my graduate students have slogged through the swamps and grabbed the critters that are out there and worked behind a desk at what was called the AEC headquarters in Washington. And my conclusion then, and still is, there is absolutely no place in the United States or the world that is better known and hence safer to store any kind of nuclear waste. Now, years ago, you could say, sure, Brisbane's salary gets paid by the DOE or it gets paid by a contract with the University of Georgia, but I retired in '05. So my salary is now paid by the teacher retirement system, and I am paid I'm not representing the public, I'm representing the field of professional ecology. And ecology came out and endorsed the concept of a National Environmental Research Park at Savannah River, and I am amazed that no one yet today has used the word NERP, N-E-R-P, about the National Environmental Research Park, or the fact that, believe it or not, we didn't set this up, the Presbyterian Church USA in October '99 endorsed the idea of a National Environmental Research Park at Savannah River. I've got handout materials and would love for you to keep these things in mind, and thank you for the opportunity to present these ideas.
I'll serve about 27 years. I would like to address the perspective on rejecting the possibility of SRS becoming an interim storage site for spent nuclear fuel. I feel that the proposed action not to accept the fuel for interim storage is premature. There is no government proposal identified for basing such a recommendation. The Greater Chamber of Commerce position that SRS is the most important economic engine in the region is well accepted. It is also an operation. There is no better laboratory to conduct the work than SRNL. The decision to accept or reject storage should be done when all the pros and cons. You've just been informed today, again, about the area, about the loss of possible loss of jobs due to funding cutback. If the interim storage were to become an operation at the site, it would be a funding stream in addition to and different from the site restoration funding. One funding stream would not necessarily be impacted by the changes in the other funding stream. All of us are aware for the requirement that the location of interim storage site to be consent-based. That would seem to be the appropriate time to decide whether or not to participate in this proposal. Therefore, I recommend that you reject this position at this early stage, allowing you to become part of the consensus-based process when all the hard facts are known. Thank you for your time.
By David Mattis.
Hello, I'm Elaine Cooper. I spoke before the subcommittee. I'm with the Sierra Club. I'll be brief. I just want to stress that this meeting is occurring during the day, and there are so many, hundreds and hundreds of people that I've talked to who are employed in Columbia who could not attend these public comments, and hopefully they've added on to the over 500 emails that stress the importance of no to nuclear waste, no to bringing out-of-state nuclear waste, no to South Carolina possibly losing control over a say on what we do with the waste from other sources, no to the transportation and the risk to our citizens. Thank you.
David and then Susan Corbett.
My name is David Matos, Carolina Peace Resource Center, longtime resident of Aiken. And I'm here to encourage you to vote to oppose interim storage of commercial nuclear waste at SRS. South Carolinians know something about nuclear waste. We know that once it lands somewhere, it's very difficult to move it somewhere else. It's that principle that says where it's placed, it's going to stay. So when we talk about interim waste of this commercial spent fuel, we're really talking about long-term, potentially permanently placing this waste. So if you don't go on the record and saying you oppose it, you're saying, well, perhaps we'll consider taking that for the long term. Let me be very succinct. There's no guarantees. When you hear, the old principle says, if you fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And I think that's very much the situation you're in as a community advisory board. If you don't take a stand against interim waste coming here, it is very likely that that will be permanent waste here. There's no guarantee. It has happened before. The promises have been made, and it's just not been followed through on. So if you want to be considered as a permanent dump for this nuclear waste, then go ahead and pretend it hasn't happened before. But if you want to take a stand and say this interim waste should not land here, then you need to go on record saying that, because you will be considered as a permanent dump. Once this waste is placed, interim commercial spent fuel, it will probably stay. And we know that it's a matter of time before that gets released into the environment. That's just a simple fact. We can isolate the waste, but it will eventually be released into the environment. And I also want to point out that there are issues with transporting this stuff. I agree completely with the idea of hardened on-site storage at the nuclear reactors until there's a permanent geological repository for this waste where it can be isolated for the long term. If you do not take a stand and vote yes for this recommendation opposing spent commercial fuel at SRS, then you're basically saying, okay, we're open to being a permanent repository. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Susan Corbett. I'm the chair of the South Carolina Sierra Club, and this is kind of our official position. We've had numerous discussions about this over the last many years with our chapter board, and this is an ongoing thing for us. We follow SRS, we follow all kinds of nuclear issues. We were involved in the Barnwell situation where it was tried to be kept open as the nation's nuclear low-level dump, and we were able to kind of get that contained. So it's something that we stay on top of. Excuse me for rambling, I just made a few notes here that I'm going to kind of jump around. I would like to speak to the idea that people are outsiders if they're not from the Aiken community. The Department of Energy goes to great pains to make sure that the CAB is representative of this whole region. There are people on the CAB from Aiken, there are people on the CAB from Augusta, from Lexington, from Hilton Head, from Columbia, because this is the community that will be affected by things that go on at SRS. So it's very natural and appropriate that people from all over this area would come and make comments and have an opinion on things that potentially could stand to impact them. I know that the Aiken people live closest to it, but all of us, as Ms. Greenlaw said, are downriver of SRS. I live about 45 miles from here. A couple other things. I don't think it's ever too early to say no. I kind of like equated to when your child comes to you and they're going to ask you something and you know that you're going to say no. You just know you're going to say no. But if you let them argue with you, you know they're going to wear you down. They're going to get something that you never intended to let them have, because in the beginning you said no and then you let them argue with you. So I am concerned that if you don't say no now, you're going to, and somebody at the last meeting talked about the 8 camels getting in the tent. Once you let that camel get his head in the tent, it is not far afterwards that the whole camel is in the tent. So just warning to you about that. I'm also very concerned, and yes, there is an incredible amount of expertise at Savannah River, but I'm worried that if the spent fuel comes here, it's just going to be too much of a temptation to not start reprocessing. It may end up being cheaper than trying to move it a second time, and that's just going to open up the whole door, the whole can of worms of reprocessing, which is what has created the waste that this group is trying to monitor and clean up. So we're talking about another huge generation of legacy waste. Someone talked earlier about loss of jobs. Why does all the jobs at Savannah River have to be based around nuclear? Why couldn't we have Savannah River be a hub for new green technologies, solar, wind, geothermal, biofuels? It could be a hub for all kinds of new energy technologies, not just nuclear. Don't get stuck. You're thinking inside the box. Think outside the box here. And, you know, I just think how dare Congress write legislation saying we're going to move this stuff somewhere and there's no exit strategy. How dare they do that? What community is going to buy this pig in a poke? Well, we're going to bring it here, but we don't ask us what we're going to do with it, and there's no funding. Just trust us, okay? I'm sorry, I've been following this a long time. We have seen where this leads. Please do not buy into this. Send a message back to that group of senators that wrote that legislation and say, you go back and write legislation that if you want communities to consider this, there must be an exit strategy, a plan for the permanent repository, and a dedicated funding stream to follow that up. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next person is Elle Brandes, followed by Laura Lance.
Good afternoon. My name is Elke Brandes. I'm a Georgia resident and I'm associated with Georgia One. I want to make a comment on the monitoring and the health effects that we were heard about earlier this afternoon. We heard about a comment that there might not be a need of to start the comprehensive monitoring again in Georgia because the dose releases are so low. But as Courtney pointed out earlier, any dose of radiation can cause cancer and other diseases that were not mentioned today. There was actually a study that cancer rates are significantly increased in the area around Savannah Riverside and Plant Vogel compared to the national standard. So my concern is actually that even if there's the slightest possibility that SRS increases cancer and makes people sick, that should be enough of a reason to find out more about the reasons. So another thing is that the CDC study that Gail was referring to in her talk, the dose reconstruction project, this study actually did not look at real people. It is a modeling study that calculates how hypothetical families that live and work near and at Savannah Riverside would be affected by radiation. But as I said, this is only theoretically, so what's really needed is epidemiological studies that look at the real people and that look at long-term effects of cancer and other health effects of people who live around Savannah Riverside. Thank you.
My name is Laura Lance. I'm a lifelong resident of Macon, South Carolina, and now reporting more, and that seems the very definition of insanity. Adding the words interim and jobs to this project is just more pillar talk, it seems to me, to seduce locals into accepting this Trojan horse, thank you. With all its unknown risk to our economy as we become known as America's premier nuclear waste dump, regular people don't use words like SNF, what is SNF storage, repository. They don't use words like that. They say, oh, Aiken, the nuclear waste dump, you going to move there? Unknown risk to our environment, unknown risk to the health and safety of countless generations into the future, because again, there's no exit strategy for this Trojan horse. Communities around the world manage to cultivate healthy economies without resorting to the business of nuclear waste dumps. It seems we can do better than that here in Aiken. We're certainly capable of better than that. Years of exhaustive research were done to assess the safety and suitability of Yucca Mountain as a safe permanent repository. This cannot be said about SRS. We're situated in the southeast where our hydrology, our seismology are in a flux because of a lot of different things. Population growth using water, climate change, fracking. There are different things that are going to affect these in the future, and the studies have yet to even be done or just starting to be done. So there are so many unknowns, and I think it's important that before we even consider something like that, we look at the whole picture. I'm opposed to using SRS for interim storage. Thank you.
My name is Sam Gore, and I'm a resident over in Augusta area. Currently, we're cleaning up our own waste and high-level waste, and I support that. What I'm having a problem with is bringing in out-of-state waste and storing it here at SRS. We talk about the 104 commercial nuclear power plants around the country. That includes those out west in California and the West Coast. And bringing their 70,000 tons of waste they're currently storing on site at their nuclear power plants, well, that's really not true. What we're really talking about is, yes, bringing that 70,000 tons, but they're going to continue making more. And that more is what you're going to keep getting from 104 power plants forever. Now, you know, I understand that we're all saying, well, the government's going to make a deal with us, and this is just going to be temporary storage here, and eventually Yucca Mountain is going to be approved and developed, and then we're going to move it there. So what you're telling me is that you would be, if you vote and doing this, that yes, you're voting for 104 power plants to bring their 70,000 tons here, and then keep on bringing it here until Yucca Mountain gets finally approved, and then we're going to ship it again. The government makes us a lot of promises, and the only thing you can be assured about of their promises to you is that they're going to change their promises, and they'll change the decision. I mean, don't we all remember Yucca Mountain was finalized and approved, and then the government changed its mind. So if you approve all these 104 power plants, bringing all the current waste here, and you're also approving them bringing in the rest of it from then on, don't count on the government finally finding someplace else to take it, and then they're going to move it again. You and I all know that will never happen. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Clint Wolf. I've been a resident of Aiken for 25 years. I retired from the Savannah River site a few years ago. At the time I retired, I was the manager of a department called Strategic Materials Technology, and my materials tech at that time. I also happen to have had in my organization the packaging and transportation group. I can tell you, it came up the other day in one of our discussions when someone said, just imagine if that oil train up in Quebec had been carrying nuclear fuel. What a disaster. And my answer is nothing would have happened. Those people would still be alive, that town would still be intact, and there would have been no problem except to get it back on another train. Those casks are virtually impenetrable and are very safe for transportation. I also heard one of my least favorite terms here today I just have to respond to, referencing dumps. That's a term that's designed to get an emotional response for the people. People in the nuclear business know that a nuclear facility is a well-engineered, well-regulated, well-protected facility. It is incredible to refer to it as a dump. I'd also like to mention that these statements about health effects, I would just challenge you to go and look for real information, not somebody's opinion. There have been studies done. If you look at the South Carolina Registry of Cancer Incidence, you'll find Aiken County is one of the lowest in the state. These levels that we experience at the perimeter of the site are so low that they have no impact on human health. You're all sitting here right now irradiating each other. That's right. I want to back off a little bit. At your own dose, annually, our background dose, which is around 360 milligram a year, that includes medical applications. But even without the medical applications, it's on the order of 300, 350 milligram a year. A normal-sized person is contributing 10–20% of that amount to from his own body. You're sitting there absorbing perhaps 35 or 40 milligrams from your own body. So if we're going to get upset about somebody thinking that 0.1 milligram is going to create a huge problem, we've really got a numbers problem here. We've got to deal with that in a rational way and not an emotional way. I just think that it's obvious. Originally, I intended to just come up and say I want to second what Susan Wood said. I thought she did a great job of presenting the case. But I also feel that there is a sense on this board, as I have perceived it and heard statements, that somehow a few people have come here and convinced you they represented the sense of the community. And all I can tell you is 12,000 people working out at the site. And you haven't heard from all of them. You haven't heard from their brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts and children and grandchildren who call Aiken home and who love Aiken because it is such a wonderful community with educational opportunities, with a very unique town compared to many southern towns. And it is that way because we've had a number of very successful people come to Aiken and provide good educational opportunities, and the fact that much of that workforce that is local originated at the Savannah River site. At one time we had 26,000 people out there. So if we want to have a robust community, if we want to continue to have a successful Savannah River site, I'm just pleading with you to not make this statement that you're contemplating tomorrow, but rather to be silent on the matter until you know what the proposition is. We don't know yet what is going to be asked. And when we do know, we can then discuss it and make up our own minds. But to just arbitrarily, right off the bat, say no, I think it's short-sighted, and I urge you to reject that proposal tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who made public comments. With that, we're going to go ahead and adjourn for the day. Tomorrow, yes, sir.
For those of us who were on